Hello, dear viewer. Do you like to be scared? A little frightened, perhaps? Maybe you like to soil your britches every once in a while to remind you of that primal emotion you once felt back at that corner store in that windy autumn day back in '08? May that be only me who feel that way. Listen to me. Sometimes I like to feel like I'm in a castle somewhere in the Baltic. I don't know what is worse, being scared or living in the Baltic. I didn't come here to make fun of our Eastern European friends, even if the producers of this show tell me to spread the anti-communist messaging brought to us by McCarthy. You know what? Let me tell you something. I hate that guy. He stepped on my shoes one time, and I have proof in this folder. Moving on. I have a collection of sorts for you, dear viewer. Is it lazy of me to group these pieces of media up like this? Of course not, because they all follow a similar trend. What is that trend? Thank you for asking. Guy with the dirty blonde hair sitting in the third row in the back with the red shirt. Yeah, you. Yeah, I'm pointing at you. Wait, what are you doing with your pants? Oh, come on. It's 9:43 in the morning. Why are you flashing the audience so early? We're not even to the part with the stage dancers yet. Oh my god. He started to wank his willy, folks. 1 second. Hey, security. Get this fucking guy out of my studio. My grandma's here and she's gonna have a stroke if this guy blow his load. The theme is unconventional horror. Now, how closely I follow the theme is really up for you to decide. I mean, I don't really care. Either way, the studio is gonna bitch at me and my bosses are gonna chew me out like always. I mean, I can't even get my allotted 30-minute smoke break around here. Can you believe that? Listen, whatever, something like Ramosa, let's get on with the show. Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. Studio Madhouse banger put out in the beginning of the new millennia. Vampire Hunter D is a character like Mad Max, which main appeal is that he is an outcast that gets involved into helping people from, in the case of D, nobles and the other denizens of the night. This is the second movie that stars the titular vampire hunter, and I would say is the one that most people should watch. I didn't rewatch the first one for this video, but I do remember the animation in the previous film being a bit more stiff than Studio Madhouse takes on the Vampiric Hunter. But that's also because it came out like 20 something years ago. 40 years now, but 20 years previous from this film, whatever, let's just go with it. My favorite aspect of this movie is the way that Madhouse is able to fully realize the setting that Vampire Hunter D takes place in. Obviously, the animation, overall artwork is beautiful, no need for discussion there, just look at it. But the environmental detail as well is astounding. The way that the gothic elements of the architecture mix together with the futuristic tones creates for such a rich environment to just look at. I mean, tell me what other anime movie you're looking at the background art and saying, damn, this shit look cool. The story is alright, nothing crazy. But the romantic center of it is engaging, if not as fleshed out as it could be, alongside with every other character that isn't D or Layla getting little to no background at all. I mean, I really don't care about the other guy with the giant hammer, and apparently the story doesn't either because he gets whacked in the first 15 minutes. Overall, not much else to mention, except that maybe the villain Carmilla kinda just pulls a fast one on everybody by trying to revive herself, but other than that, you should definitely watch this one for the visual aspects alone. I almost forgot to mention the score of the film is fantastic, really sets up the whole feeling while watching this. Go check it out. Love Sucks, Night 1 and Night 2. Okay viewer, bear with me. This is a porn game, straight up. The majority of the writing is describing the sex acts that are going on. That is a surface level observation. It may be a porn game, but at the end of Night 2, I was actually invested in not only the stories, but the characters as well. It doesn't hurt that the art is also very, very fucking good. Literally, you know. It's a bit odd, because when starting out, I didn't think nothing about Jan or Anna, but with all the characterization they get, basically making them seem more than sex objects to satisfy the reader's desire, they seem, to me at least, like genuine individuals who just so happen to need to have sex with the main character and per proxy the player. That may seem like a bit of a contradiction, but there's something about the down-to-earth writing and the nature of the game being self-aware about the circumstance that it finds itself in, while still playing the major plot points straight for the most part. It's also sometimes, funny. There is some technical aspects that I don't like, but you have to remember that this is a very small team, so things like forgettable music that I just turned off and put something else in the background should be mentioned but not heavily criticized. Perhaps that shouldn't be the case, and it should be mentioned, and not only the music, but the game does overall feel a little bit clunky. However, that didn't really bother me, because I'm playing a visual novel here. This is a visual novel, and the most important thing is in a visual novel is, the writing. And arguably controller support, but, thankfully Love Sucks does have controller support and enjoyable writing. It's like one of those cheesy Halloween movies with low stakes, usually the ones you find on ABC Family or Freeform, whatever it's called now, or on Disney Channel, but with, sex and aimed at adult audiences. This is certainly not fun for the whole family, but it's fun for me. The fact that saves transfer between nights, because these are two separate games, is nice, and I wish more sequels did this. Overall, I think if I were to recommend a Western era gay, I'd easily recommend this one. Also, it's obvious, Naomi is best girl. Resident Evil 2 Remake. First and foremost, I did not finish Scenario B, or Claire's scenario, because I simply did not find a compelling reason to. This doesn't mean that I didn't like the game or that the game is bad. On the contrary, RE2 Remake is a tight and very polished experience that benefits from multiple playthroughs because of the game is knowledge based. However, that is also what makes it not compelling enough to finish the second scenario, since I know what's going to happen. The slight variations that the game makes in the second scenario isn't enough to keep my interest. However, it is interesting to see a game take on this form of storytelling, having roughly the same story but slight variations added to expand the scope of the world and story. That is normally reserved for visual novels. The game is fun but not scary. I guess I should have tempered expectations because Resident Evil falls more into the cheesy thriller territory rather than straight up horror. Although every time the tyrant comes out of nowhere to sock me in the face, I was startled, I'm not gonna lie. Along with the jump scares found sparsely through the game. This was a new experience for me, as I never played a survival horror game before, and I kinda enjoyed my time with it. Plus, I mean, come on, just look at my boy Leon, for real. Sheesh. High School of the Dead, probably one of the worst animes I've ever seen. But before I just dump all of the things I don't like about this masterpiece of an anime, at least let me tell you about the two things that I, sort of enjoyed. First, the animation. All things considered, it's pretty good. Second, the story segments where none of the main cast is involved, the little pieces of world building that are occurring in the background, like the EMP going off in the last episode, that stuff is the best part of the show. Period. If the show were to always be like that, if the show was still about high schoolers having to deal with the zombie apocalypse, but it included how the governments of the world would react, and the inevitable slow downfall of society, day by day, similar to how the show does it already, but without all of the panty shots, sexualization of women, and maybe better character writing, then the show would be quite okay in my opinion. However, the show is so reliant on showing you either a panty or boob shot that if you were to count how many times the show went without it for more than 5 minutes, you wouldn't even get to 2 hands. I know this show is classified as an ecchi show, and in my anime list, it's the second tag that describes the show. So I guess it's on me for misremembering that this show wasn't just about high schoolers killing zombies, but also an underwear exhibition, or an underwear fashion show. My problem is that the show doesn't have the capacity for writing 3-dimensional women, and the over-sexualization of these women isn't justified in any way. Look at the previous entry on this list, if these are presented in the same order as I make these write-ups. Love Sucks Night 1 and Night 2. At least in the porn game, the women are actually more believably written than in this 4-hour character-driven show, because I might be tripping here and thinking this, but aren't these type of zombie survival movies predicated on seeing how our ragtag group of survivors knock heads with one another in an attempt to overcome the dead that are trying to kill them? And Love Sucks, it actually has believable characterization that fleshes out these characters, and sure, it isn't the best. Who's expecting a well-written, fully fleshed out, and totally realized female character in a porn game? But fuck, man, at least they tried. High School of the Dead gives the same amount of effort in writing its females in a believable way as the CIA trying to hide political assassinations. There's a problem when like 70% of the main cast is women. You have all these harem tropes in here as well. Definitely at least 2 of our leading ladies want to fuck whatever this guy's name is. And the remaining 2 are maybe leaning towards yes. Another thing, the only black guy in the show is a thief and attempted rapist. So yeah, the only black guy, and he also wears baggy shorts and a t-shirt with a marijuana pen and a bandana, but at least he's portrayed with braces, so you get what you take what you can get, I guess. Not even the president of the United States, which at the time would have been Barack Obama, is black. He's not even black, he's white. I mean, that seemed like an easy opportunity to include an Afro-American in there, but what do I know? Listen, this show is actually ass. I mean, literally and metaphorically. With every episode, I lost a little bit of my soul, and I can only really see two or three episodes at a time because I couldn't do it. It's fundamentally stupid. Even the most bare-bone things can seem intriguing and gripping when put next to a poorly written high school drama that keeps shoving boobs in your face because it thinks you're gonna get bored if you don't see some action, whether that be a woman's panties or a zombie's head getting blown off. I had to sit through this fucking garbage because I was too stubborn to just leave it, which I should have. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just a little upset, that's all. Anyway, just don't watch this show because it's not even the type of bad show that is still enjoyable for its corny nature or because it plays itself so serious that it circles back to being absurd. And I would know about enjoying shitty movies because one of my favorite movies of all time is the first Fast and Furious. Unironically, I'm sorry if I butchered the name. Psycho Busujima-san is best girl, and reluctantly, let's just move on. A Japanese horror film, except it doesn't try to be scary in the traditional sense. I believe that the movie's portraying such ugly emotions like lust, greed, and violence in such a raw way that it makes you uneasy. That is how the movie tries to frighten you, by showing you the brutality of a man being overcome with emotions that he resorts to destroying those who have wronged him, all while grimacing at the sights of such cheesy kills. I mean, this is still in the era of having people being stabbed once and having a little bit of blood, if any at all, to portray their deaths, but that isn't really the point. The movie, in reality, doesn't want to revel in the gore, even though it kind of does. But rather, in clearly showing the audience people being murdered, it shows the outcome of humans being pushed to the breaking point. In that regard, this movie is almost like a psychological thriller, rather than a straight-up horror movie, because it plays heavily into the emotions of what it means to be a quote-unquote demon. All the people in the movie have done something wrong, but it's really a matter of perspective. Rather than the movie outright saying what is good or bad, it shows you through a quite complex narrative structure the different perspectives and the actions taken from the person's point of view. What might seem like light barbarism to one might be justified for survival to another. The story is also very good. I've always been a bit critical when it comes to the pacing of these older Japanese films because they tend to have a lot of empty space. Maybe it's my dopamine addicted Western brain talking here, but these old Japanese movies have a habit of having nothing going on in the scene, and even if they're trying to establish something, there's probably a better way of going about it. But hey, I mean, who am I to say? I'm just some guy talking into a microphone at the end of the day. One thing that this movie does perfectly, in my opinion, is the direction and the cinematography. The cinematography especially. The use of heavy lighting in this movie to create deep shadows and illuminate the faces of the cast in a way that can be interpreted as the director Toshio Matsumoto, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, trying to depict the two-faced nature of all these characters creates for one of the most visually interesting black and white films I've ever seen. As well as the direction of the film, because you have to be on your toes since the film loves showing sequences that have played out in the character's head and haven't actually happened. Overall, this isn't the conventional Japanese horror film that many people think when you say Japanese horror, but I think this is still a very interesting watch that I'd easily recommend if you could put up with the molasses style pacing of these older Japanese films. I get for my Japanese audience, I guess, for the programming. I mean, I don't even kite kurete arigato sugi. No, fuck. Kite kurete arigato sugi desu. I'm sorry. Anyway, John Carpenter's The Thing. First of all, let me tell you that this movie is so disgusting and repulsive with its makeup and special effects. It's fantastic. I can't remember the last time I was so off-put by just looking at something, so big props to the movie for that. On a more serious note, however, this movie is a perfect example of how paranoia can be a horrifying thing, and how people can turn on each other on a dime. This, yet again, is another unconventional horror movie that I've picked out, but it falls more in line with the bodily thriller like Resident Evil than the deep psychological examination of human emotions that demons portray. Not to say that paranoia isn't also a human emotion, but I feel like the movie strikes the most emotion out of the viewer from the sheer impact that the grotesque creatures that fill the screen have. It's interesting to see that, I can only assume, stable crew fall into madness as they suspect everyone and trust no one and slowly destroy each other from inside out. If you think about it, the crew did more damage to themselves than the thing did to them. The score is also fantastic and used almost perfectly to give the extra oomph to scenes that drive up the tension. I could also make a bunch of analogies or references to Among Us, but I'm gonna spare you from that, okay? You can thank me later. Overall, not as deep as Demons or as stylish as Vampire Hunter D, but this is probably the most entertaining thing I've watched so far. The 2 hours just flew by, and I would highly recommend watching it with a tub of popcorn. Well, maybe leave the popcorn if you get grossed out easily. Hunt Showdown. An online game? Yes. Unfortunately, I've relapsed and have begun playing online games again. I've matured a little bit because I just assumed that online games were a waste of time and that a single player game offered a more curated experience that was worth the player's time, more than an online game. But then I started to think that these online games are the games that have the strongest gameplay loop. Think about it. Since an online game is relatively simple in premise, in Hunt Showdown's case is that there are other players on the map trying to take down the same bounty, and you have to fight off the monsters and also the players to achieve your goal. These online games have the strongest and tightest gameplay loops in the industry, and that is why they are so popular. Because if you are a busy person, you don't have a lot of time to invest into multiple gameplay systems that take hours to learn, or a narrative journey that takes 50 hours to complete. These online games provide a relatively simple gameplay loop that can be learned quickly and mastered with dedicated time. However, that isn't the point of this video. I'm not here to yap about concepts such as gameplay loops. I'm here for the horror vibe. No need to fret, dear viewer. Hunt Showdown has got that covered. This is one of the games that give you all sorts of emotions, whether that be adrenaline, trepidation, or straight up fear. Because of that online element I mentioned previously, dear viewer, since the gameplay is structured with permadeath in mind, every gunfight holds significant weight. This leads to tense moments where you are stalking somebody from the tall grass or peeking through a window to try to find the nearby enemy. In addition, this game probably relies on sound cues more than any other online game I've played, and there's sound cues that actually matter and work. The audio system in this game is phenomenal, I'd say, but I have no experience in that. I'm not a game designer, right? Even able to accurately pinpoint gunfire from 100 meters plus. This plays into the horror element of the game, as one of the scariest things a person can experience is a sound they don't recognize. And if you ever heard a Wendigo, I've seen my fair share, but you know what I'm talking about. And if they do recognize it as dangerous, then they fear what they hear but cannot see. That's the skinwalker, right? This is why this game is perfect for this list, because it has that heart-racing power to it. Imagine a scenario where you are outnumbered, stalking in a bush, hearing 2 guys running in your direction. You manage to get a shot off on one of them because they had their back turned, but you didn't kill them, and now they are both on you. You run into the bushes and hide, trying to figure out where they are pushing you. Suddenly you hear a stick of dynamite whizzing through the air and move to the nearby ridge, all whilst the enemy opens fire on you. It's definitely more of a desperate fight for survival than traditional horror, but that really depends on what your definition of horror is. Does horror mean being scared? Then being scared for your life is just as valid. This doesn't mean that Hunt Showdown is a perfect game, however. It has its quirks, and that does hold it back somewhat, but it's more of a streamlined and accessible extraction shooter that has elements of horror to give it a unique style and atmosphere. I would say check it out if you're interested. Bloodborne. The last entry in this list is more of an honorable mention because I didn't finish Bloodborne. I know, but give me a second for this particular video. But I've had enough runs to accurately talk about the game, and I'm not even going to be talking about the in-depth mechanics, so give me a break. Instead, I'll be talking about the vibe that this game gives off. Oh my god, I know, but just relax, bro. Give me a second. Many of you might know what Bloodborne is, especially with the monumental success of Elden Ring launching and solidifying From Software into the top echelon of game studios. So I'll keep my explanation of what the game Bloodborne is brief. But let's just say that there is a reason why so many people are begging for a PC port. even though a PC port would not solve the 30 frames per second design of Bloodborne, but I'll avoid the technical talk for another time, or even a sequel, which will never happen, at least not developed by From Software. It's not gonna happen. But I don't know if From Software holds the IP rights or if Sony/PlayStation does, so who knows, man. My rambling aside, the reason why this game is so special and deserves a spot on this compilation of sorts, if you can even, I don't even know. And why I'm closing with this game makes you think why I didn't finish it, but then whatever. It's because of the unique nature of how the descent into madness that is associated with this game's main inspiration, Lovecraftian horror, is associated with. Let me explain what cannot be explained. I'm just kidding, it's pretty simple. In From Software's third-person hack-and-slash catalog, which is what I will be calling Souls-like or Soul, Blood, Shadow, Ring-like from now on, the name is frankly getting out of hand. I guess, Soulsborne was okay, sounded nice, but then Sekiro came out of nowhere, and Elden Ring came out, and you can't compare Dark Souls to Elden Ring because they're fundamentally the same game, but they approach things differently. It's just a can of worms that isn't the point of this video. Anyway, in From Software's games, there's usually a second, more precious currency. For example, humanity in Dark Souls 1, human effigies in Dark Souls 2, or in this case, insight in Bloodborne. You could also, technically soul tendency in Demon Souls, whatever. Now, in the stories of Lovecraft, people become aware of something and start to become mad with knowledge. That's a gross simplification. There's a lot of interpretation to be had, but that's what people typically associate with these stories. Person sees a big fish and they go crazy. In Bloodborne, there is a big fish and you also go crazy, but the game starts you off at 0 insight. You can't even level up because you're such an ignorant slave. But once you begin your descent into Yharnam's underbelly, metaphorically and literally, it's more of an ascent. In the case of the Chalice dungeons, Nightmare, by the way, you gain more insight and become more and more insane, to the point where you start seeing alien creatures called amygdala on the buildings of the Cathedral Ward. It's how the game presents this descent, because it doesn't show you from the get-go, but it slowly reveals it to you as you try to figure out more and more of the story, which albeit is a fucking mess to try to piece yourself, but hey, there's always a YouTube video to show you the way. Hey, I'm not gonna judge you. I did it myself. Bloodborne is a game I've always played in October to get me into that spooky mood, but this is why maybe I didn't finish it this playthrough, because the moon isn't in its proper place, so I can't get in touch with the old ones and play this game. Anyway, I don't have to tell you to check out Bloodborne. I mean, you just look at it and you have to get a PlayStation though because it's an exclusive, but whatever. Anyway, dear viewer, this show has been a mess, but what are you gonna do when the studio pulls all your funding for crack cocaine? I don't know what to do anymore. I gotta hire more staff and then fire them. I gotta make our investors happy, right? The guy, that guy. I'm off the cuff. This is off the dome. The guy who blew his load earlier, he got it everywhere. Thankfully, the studio staff is so good at picking up mess from, my escapades. That they picked it up so efficiently, and my grandma's okay, thank you for asking. Anyway, dear viewer, this has been a compilation of sorts. A fucking mess, if you ask me. Horror-inspired media that gets you into that spooky mood, even though we're in June and not October. But hey, I was gonna say being early or coming early is always better than coming late, but depends on who you ask. Anyway, look, enough with the cum jokes, okay? Enough with the cum jokes. This is getting out of hand. Anyway, look, goodbye. Thank you for watching, and as always, goodbye.